Hi, it's Marcus again from the Bain clan, and we're going to discuss something today that we want to be able to understand what we think of when we talk about divine timing. You know what we mean. It's one of those things we often use to describe something when it's perfectly timed. And I have to say, over the years, I've heard a lot of people, including myself in the past, I don't like to say past, in years gone by, that I've tried everything. I just can't seem to be able to master this. Or, I used to be able to do this, but now I can't. So, what I've become aware of is it's not about when things are ready for us, but when we are ready for the things, whatever they are. Of course, we often think, oh, I've done such a lot of work, I'm doing this every day, I'm studying, I'm doing these meditations, I'm doing these practices, and still I haven't mastered it. I mean, to be honest, master is a word often bandied about today because of certain practices that are very popular. But in my view, as an old-timer, as someone that comes from the old school, a master is someone who spends his life mastering something, whether it's carpentry or spiritual work or any type of practice. To become a master of something, you have to spend a lot of time, but more than time, it's dedicating yourself to it. That actually is a bit more about what this talks about. So after doing all this work, people often say, I don't understand, I've done all this and I still haven't got it. The problem is, of course, that we, humans, we're just not really in tune with what our life's journey is all about. And this is where we fall over in many an occasion in this life. Now, as an analogy to this, I remember when I was 23, I was in the Merchant Navy, I was electrical engineering officer, and I used to go away for 6 or 9 months at a time. And when I was 23, I took all these Kabbalistic books with me on my journey. And I thought, while I'm away this trip, I'm going to study this. And I tried. And I tried. And I read. And I read. And I sat. And I focused. I just couldn't get it. It just wouldn't sink in. It just wasn't feeling right. And I decided after a while, it's just not the right time. I was quite aware even at 23 to know that actually, but it wasn't the right time. And then 20 years later, when I was 43, I actually did the same thing. I got books. In fact, when I say I got books came flying towards me on these subjects, on Kabbalah and magic. And various things came my way. All of a sudden I'd walk in a bookshop and there'd be a book right in front of me. Or I'd walk around the aisles of a bookshop and stop and there'd be the book I needed. And this happened to me during that phase all the time. And it still happens today. Because I was in tune. I was resonating, as we say nowadays, with my divine purpose. With what my lifetime had me learning to do at that time. And so I found all the material. I then decided I'd look for a teacher, and a teacher actually found me via one of their pupils. It's a long story, so I'm not going to go there. So I found my teacher. Very, very blessed, because the man I found was a great Kabbalist and a true master of Kabbalah, as well as all what we call the mysteries. So So I've been aware about this for quite a while on some level. However, never to the extent that I am aware of now. This probably because of the work that I've been undertaking these last 6 to 10 years, which has really opened me up to a new consciousness and reality. I am now totally aware that if I want to focus on a particular thing, I first observe several signs or pointers. 1. Was my research into this subject easy? 2. Did things fall into place, such as materials and guides, etc.? 3. Am I feeling that this is making me joyful? So if it's not making you joyful, I would say to anybody, no matter what it is, it's not something you should be doing. Because every day we should be in joy as much as possible. And if you're going to learn something that is not going to make you joyful, I would suggest that it's possibly not the right time for you to be practicing this. So, just like we've discussed in the past, it's all about being in the flow. Or actually, more concisely, being in your flow. And one of the things we often think of in life is we think that life is a series of events. You know, first we're doing this, and then my next phase of life is this, and then my next phase I'm learning this, and then I'm doing this. And to an extent that's true. But this is where we have difficulty because of these understandings, if you like. I'll give you an analogy from Tai Chi. When we learn Tai Chi form, we have to learn various postures. And then, after learning them, we need to put them together to create the set which we know as Tai Chi form. All the single moves are joined together. Once we have got that, we then learn how to make all those different postures come together without a pause, creating one move from the beginning to the end of the 37 postures. When one posture finishes, the next one is already beginning, forming a total moving meditation from start to finish. And this is similar to what I do in my meditations, actually, when I talk about the one breath. Any of you that have heard my meditations will know exactly what I mean. So, life is just the same for us, if only we could realize it. Each bit of our life moves us to the next bit, forming one lifetime. And as I always say, it's not what happens to us, but how we handle it. And everything that happens to us is to make us who we need to be. So hopefully you can understand how these two sayings I use all the time emphasize these points about being in the flow, and how our life is the flow. So here is why we truly need to be in the flow, being in your flow. Because actually that is all we truly have in a lifetime. The problems that we encounter in our lives usually occur when we try and go against the flow and interfere with our life's journey. And don't forget, it's us, before we came into this lifetime, that have planned our journey. So, do this now, and watch your life change to just the way it is. It's a good name for a website, that. So, being in your flow. I used an analogy the other day talking to a friend about this, of looking at the current on a river and throwing a leaf onto the surface of the water that's caught in this current and is flowing rapidly along this river. And that's like us in our life, us travelling along in this current, our lifetime. And then there's a big log in the water, stuck in the water, and the leaf gets up to the log and hits it. Now, that is us in our lifetime. We can skate around the log, keeping close to the log and continuing on our journey. Or we can be totally diverted from that log over to the side, over to the bank, and get caught on the bank. Eventually, of course, we move on again as the wind catches us or the water goes a bit faster, and we move back into the current again. But if we'd have just stayed in our flow and just gone round the obstacle, not been diverted by the obstacle, then we'd have stayed in our flow and everything would have been perfect. We can't help but have these obstacles in our lives because of our karmic journeys up to now, let's say. In the future, I don't think there'll be any logs. But for now, we still have a bit of this debris, as I call it, this dross that we've been carrying around. As much as we try and get rid of it all, there's always a little bit, until we can be perfect, like only a few have managed in this life. And so we go. Another thing is, when you can stay in your heart, as I often say, be in your heart space. Stay in your joy. When we can do this, that helps us stay in our flow. Because if we're connected to our heart and we're in our heart, using the analogy of the current and the leaf, if you're in your heart and you hit the obstacle, your heart space is so powerful, it will allow you to not be affected by this obstacle and to continue around it and on your journey. Stay in your heart. I've said this for years now. There is nothing more valuable that we can do. And I fall foul of this at times, of course. We all do. As soon as you fall foul of it and you come out your heart space, get back in as soon as possible. Get back in your joy as soon as you can. And be back in your flow. Stay there. Namaste. Thank you for listening.